If Washington wants to get back on track against Maryland, they're going to need to get healthy.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. Lars, just a quick reminder to all the everydays out there before we get going, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you don't miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio-only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the program out a lot. Like I was going to say, before I got to make sure we get that reminder in there, we got a really fun show coming out all the everydayers today. We want to talk about just some overall takeaways from the Ohio State game, some positives, some negatives, everything else in between. We'll get there in a little bit because we need to talk about how far Washington might be away from the Big Ten elite, some recruiting discussions that are going to be had in there as well, because it's not as far as you might think. But the number one thing, and it kind of showed as we tied segment 1 and 2 together, is Washington was very much impacted by a couple of the injuries we saw coming into yesterday's game, and that happened in the middle of the contest as well. And you have to think about how much this, all this string of injuries, might impact this team moving forward.
It really does, because the more you think about who is actually injured and not playing, you look at the season-ending guys aside, Rahshawn Davis, all those guys. The Rasheed Williams one, to me, is kind of the one that I think is becoming more of an afterthought that is having a significant impact. And you kind of, but you can play that out, because, and we'll talk about it a bit, but you look at it as and what we're going to talk about in the second segment as well, the depth, the options, the guys, the bodies that you have where, Desmond Roebuck has been nice. Rain Reinsrod keeps getting a catch or two here and there, but you look at, there's no true second option. Like Desmond is probably the closest one you got, but what Rasheed offers from his size and a little more experience than Desmond is those type of guys. But then you look at linebacker, same thing. When you don't have Buddha, you got Devin Bryant, who can do a job, but I went back and watched the Jeremiah Smith touchdown. Still don't really know who you probably credit that one to Leroy at the end of the day. But, you have Devin Bryant and Leroy chasing after him. And, again, neither one of them touched him. So you're looking at it saying you have the bodies, but the gap between each position and each guy gets increasingly wider the more you go down the depth chart.
So I hear what you're saying, and I do agree with you, but that's kind of where to lead into the guy where and why I disagree. No injury was more impactful, and I think it's a very close 1 and 2. And I don't, to be honest, I don't think Rasheed is in the top 2. Number 1 is the Carver Willis injury, and number 2 is Hector. And a lot of that is credit to Ohio State's elite defense, their top tier defense. But a lot of that was, you could very clearly see a difference after Carver Willis came out of the game. And it doesn't look like that's going to be a super long-term thing. We'll find out more about it from Jed Fish later on Monday as the everydayers are listening to this. But there was something where I saw him walking on the sideline after the game with a limp, no ice pack around the leg that was affected. Seemed to be in decent enough spirits where it didn't seem like it was going to be a very long-term sort of thing again. But we'll wait and see to hear what the results of the MRI and everything like that are. You could just see such a big difference there. And it was the same thing with Zach Durfee, where the defensive line did a solid job. Was it great? No. But it did a solid enough job early on in the contest, pressuring Julian Sayin. And after Zach Durfee went down, which was on the third down stop on 3rd and 6, where Julian Sayin threw it incomplete over the middle, the ball bounced, and then, everything just kind of went from there. You could just see such a big difference in the defensive line from there. And those are the two biggest things where throughout the offseason, we saw the most questions from everydayers was, hey, how are the trenches going to look? And through the non-conference schedule, we certainly still saw an improvement among this group. Now, Ohio State is the elite of the elite of the elite measuring sticks in this conference, as we talked about on our Friday show. So it's very clear that there's still a ways to go. But I look at those two injuries and say, your next 2 games are against Maryland and Rutgers. If, we'll see what these injuries look like, but this is where the real test of what these injuries are going to do to impact your team. If Carver Willis is able to get back, if Zach Durfee, Rahshawn Clark, Tacario Davis, if some of these guys are able to return within the next week or two, we'll really see how the depth on this team is tested, because we saw some guys show up. We talked about Dylan Robinson after the game. There are some guys that did show up and did make an impact in one way or another. But I think that Carver Willis and Zach Durfee were by far the biggest pieces missing, and give me the most concern as we just kind of look ahead to Maryland at this point.
I agree with you from that perspective. And two names that kind of one you talked about with Isaiah Ward and the other being Deshaun Lynch, two guys that weren't necessarily healthy throughout fall camp that are now playing, but you can kind of see there's still, I'm not saying rust or anything like that, but just there's still a little bit of catch-up period. And so when you're still having those guys trying to get up to full speed and you're losing your starters on top of it, the depth that, again, you have, the bodies that you have are good, but they're still not fully at 100%. And so I that's why I agree in terms of Durfee. The Carver thing, I mean, I don't know. I feel like Max at this point should be good enough to do a job. I could be wrong. And now, again, it is Ohio State. It is, that vaunted defense. So maybe he doesn't, look as great against Ohio State, but is able to hang against Maryland if he has to have a spot start, that sort of thing. Or
sure,
maybe Carver gets the start, but then, third quarter-ish, it's like, okay, maybe let's see if Max can get in there as well. Because you're not flipping Drew. We've been over that time and time again. You're not flipping Drew as a party at this point in the season to left tackle from right tackle. And Max is now back into football shape enough to where you can't say, oh, well, he's still working his way back. He's still – like, you went to go get Max for a serviceable two-time All-American JUCO player to do a job, to be a backup, to be a solid option if, need be. And so I think the depth really shouldn't be a concern there, but I understand. I hear your point. I agree with it, that it is a concern because of what we saw against Ohio State. I just look at both Rutgers and Maryland, Maryland's 4-0, and they're probably the cheapest 4-0 in the country. Like, you look at Hanson and, a couple of other schools there, they have a true freshman quarterback. So there's a lot there for Washington to be able to get after, and you would think that, they're right for the picking, but then again, you got to travel all the way to State, University Park, I think. College Park, yeah. So you're talking about a long cross-country flight. Jed said I think they'll leave it on Thursday. So these are all little factors to where when you're elevating guys and trying to mix and match, there's a lot of juggling going on.
No, there absolutely is. And, just to make sure we touch on the secondary before we get out of here, it's one thing that I don't think we got to on the post-game show either, is Jed Fish said that it was with Tacario Davis not playing, it was something where the doctors didn't believe that he'd be able to fully protect himself when tackling, which kind of lines up with what we were hearing leading up to the game and everything, with what the injury is and what, could be going on in terms of maybe not being cleared for contact by the doctors before the games, that sort of situation. If he's able to be cleared, I don't really have a lot of questions with the secondary, where you talk about that play with Jeremiah Smith that we did go through on the post-game show, as the Everdares know. Somebody just needs to, trigger on that and come downhill and just kind of leave the zone. When you see two guys just running those sorts of routes, it's more so, and that's what you lose by not having two senior corners on the field on the outside, and somebody, Rahshawn Clark at nickel, who is shown to be really experienced and just a really high impact player, I should say, and have that kind of football IQ to come off his zone and just make a play, which is a really, really important thing, especially when you're sending 6-7 guys after the quarterback and he's able to get the ball out quickly on a route that is perfectly designed to beat a play like that. The secondary, I think that will be fine long-term. I like the way Dylan Robinson looked in this game. I love the way Alex McLaughlin looked in this game. I have more on that later on. But I think that the biggest thing that you should take away from this game is, and Jed Fish and Jonah Coleman both said this after the game, is we are happy with the way we were able to hang in through the majority of this. And it was a one possession game into the fourth quarter. And yeah, you're happy with that, right? Like, is that enough when you think about Washington, which is in the national championship 2 seasons ago? No, not necessarily, but with how the roster shaped up and how everything else went down, there's certainly something to be said for that. And I look at it and I say, Washington is still not an elite program in the Big Ten, but it certainly is closer than you think. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5 Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most is how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot. You can take it anywhere and get that boost when you need it, which is absolutely fantastic news for people like me and Lars, because when we're at the stadium all day covering a game, doing anything like that, sometimes we get really tired and we need a boost. And it's so helpful just having 5 Hour Energy. And honestly, I love how fast it kicks in and the fact that it's sugar-free, so I don't have to worry about crashing later. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5 Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love or be bold and try something new in-store and online at www.5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. Lars, one of the things that we wanted to discuss with this is recruiting, because this is something where we look at what Jed Fish and Senior Director of Player Personnel Matt Doherty and the rest of this coaching staff have done since they got here, and they've recruited a high level. You got a top 20 class right now. You brought in a top 20 class last year. That's solid. You can still continue to improve on that. And I feel like that's a lot of what the intention was with this weekend, with all the 2026, a couple of high-end guys in 2026 that are still outstanding, plus 2027s, 2028. I was standing next to a 5-star tight end Titan McNeil for a little while, number 1 tight end in the country, 2028 player from the state of Washington and everything, a little farther down the line. But you looked around on the sidelines before the game, and there were so many, and, to tie this together with the first segment, high impact trench players that were standing around. So Myels Smith, you see Elija Harmon, Jon Ioane from Tustin is a really, really interesting name, in my opinion. Troy Bowens is another guy. And then, of course, you look at some of the in-state guys. I didn't see Tavita Nonu, who had tweeted out earlier in the week that he wasn't going to be able to make the trip. I couldn't confirm that if he did end up showing up or not. But I looked at how many guys were around, and, win or loss, it seems like they all had a really great time and really seemed to enjoy the experience of Husky Stadium. And I think this is one thing that, because we got a lot of questions saying in a game where you're facing off with the number 1 team in the country and could lose your home winning streak, could do all these different things, is it best to send a message in a game that you might lose? And from some things I've heard from some sources, some people who are certainly in the know on this, it seems like all the recruits certainly had a tremendous experience and learning and seeing what it was all about. And I think this is one of the things that you and I have talked about a lot with this, especially in the trenches. And, to answer the question of how far Washington might be away from the Big Ten elite, we look at the offensive line. Having a 5-star commit who was on campus in Kodi Greene in this class is important as you continue to improve that side of the ball. But you look on defense, and there are so many opportunities for some of these, big time high school defensive tackle, defensive line recruits as a whole on the West Coast to come in and play early. You can show that in a game like this where it's, Ontario Thompson looks solid. Tacario Davis had a really nice day in that game. Bryce Butler, Linus Davis, the majority of these guys, I know Armand Parker got a decent amount of snaps as well. The majority of these guys that played in this game, they're going to be gone. They're going to be out of eligibility in a year or in 2 years. So you're going to have an opportunity to come in and play early and play often. And we believe that you can make an impact and you can help move this program forward, along with some 2026 guys that were on campus in Derek Colman-Brusa and Tiayu Mukais on that side of the ball. And I think that was the biggest takeaway, is you could see Washington was able to hold up well enough in the trenches. Did they do an elite job and impact the game in a, 10 out of 10 way? No, not necessarily, but you did enough to show these recruits that, hey, look where we are right now. Think about where we could be with you on this team. And I think that's something that, at least from what I've heard, has resonated with some of these guys.
If you remember, that's kind of what Jed's 22 class at Arizona was, where he got all the talent together when the program on the field was absolute dog. And, that's not the good kind of dog, in case you're wondering. But when you look at how Jed has kind of built his programs, and again, albeit in a very small, condensed sample size, he knows how to sell the future and how to sell players and saying, hey, you know what? Come see our atmosphere. Come look what was it, 72, 73,000, like the most since the Nebraska game in 2010 in terms of fans attending that game yesterday. But a lot of them Ohio State fans, pretty clearly there. But it's certainly a significant amount of UW fans as well. So it's a good message, even though, you're probably going to lose that game going into it, or you're going to bet on losing. UW's not going to bet on losing, but you're going to bet probably UW's not going to win that game. So why bring the recruits in? Well, show them the big time atmosphere, show them the big stage that you have. Just because you don't win the game doesn't mean you're not going to get the recruit. Like, winning and recruiting do correlate on some level, but when you look at the, like, walking around the stadium yesterday, just kind of, as I told you before the game, like, I did a couple of laps just sort of around the field. Went to go see the Ohio State side, just getting the vibe and everything. And I think being around that type of environment, that atmosphere, I mean, I know you're a big baseball guy, so, having the Mariners there and all these other dignitaries and, everybody just kind of making it a destination. I think that's kind of the summation that Jed's really trying to drive out here. And so making UW a destination doesn't preclude you from losing against Ohio State. Now, if you lost to Maryland at home, or if you lost to insert other school here,
Rutgers, the next home game, yeah.
Northwestern, UCLA, there's a lot of schools that can take a straight shot here. But when you think about it, it was a good decision for the staff to bring these guys in, especially all together, because weather was great, everything was great, fans packed it out. It showed, if I'm a recruit, I'm thinking, okay, you know what? Didn't get destroyed, didn't do great, but didn't get destroyed. And I think, with this coaching staff, my relationships, I think we can build something special here. That's the vision that Jed's selling with this past weekend.
So I want to go back to one thing you said, because it was a conversation I had with somebody a few weeks ago where you talk about turning UW into a destination. And the point that this person made to me was the last couple of coaching staffs, and not to take anything away from their approach, especially when you go back and you look at Chris Peterson, what he was able to do toward the end of his time. The last couple of coaching staffs that Washington has brought in through, various searches when needing a new head coach have come from the G5 route, where a lot of it has been, hey, we know how to win with this kind of talent. We know how to find the gems and find this and find that. With this coaching staff is also very, very good at. But this coaching staff coming over from another Pac-12 or former Pac-12 program, RIP, coming over from a power conference where you understand that if you want to compete at the highest level, you need to recruit at the highest level, gives them a different approach. And it's something that Jed has talked about a lot over the last couple of weeks. When you think about, some of the things that we don't always have time to get into on this show, like the fact that the Go Big fundraiser, they've already gotten through $123 million in their first year and have raised the goal from $300 million to $350. And I asked Jed Fish about that last week. And one of the first things he said in terms of what he wants more so going forward is like, yeah, we want to upgrade the locker room. We want to do this. We want to do that. But also that everything he has gotten, that he's wanted and asked for since he got here, he's gotten from this athletic department, from this administration. And that's a really good sign, because it all goes back to your point of turning Washington into a destination. Because we talk about that on this show a lot, that Washington has the ability to compete at the highest level. They have that ability. They showed it. I said it a couple minutes ago. I know it's a stunner. Washington was in the national championship 2 years ago. As much as some fan bases and some people, especially when you look at the SEC, might not want to pay attention to that, might not want to give Washington credit for that. That is how high this program can go. And Jed Fish and his coaching staff, they understand that, and they know what it takes to get back there. And it is a matter of building it up. And it is something that sometimes does require a little bit of patience and sometimes does take time. But I look at the trajectory that they're on, and it's okay. And Jonah Coleman said it after the game. He said, and we put it out on all our social media here on YouTube, everywhere else, that Jonah said, if that's the number one team in the country, from the way we went toe-to-toe with them, we have a hell of a good team. That was his point. And if that's where you are in year two, that's great. Is that enough to compete for the college football playoff every year, to compete for a Big Ten championship, to compete to go win these playoff games? Not necessarily, but is a huge step in the right direction, especially considering what the roster looked like and what everything was like when this coaching staff got here. So if you have a little bit of patience and you let things continue to play out over the 2026 cycle and the 2027 cycle, all of a sudden, there is no reason that you can't look at this program in a year, in 2 years, as Jed continues to build things the way that he wants, and especially with these resources, which is, as he's told us several times since the day he got here, is one of the biggest reasons that he made the move. There is no reason to believe that he can't continue to take this program to the next level.
Yeah, Jed, certainly the reason why you go and spend $7.5 million on Jed Fish starting out is he knows how to build the infrastructure. It's not, when you talk about going the G5 route, Kalen was great, but Kalen, let's be real, was a stroke of luck when you look at how all that, A came together and B wound up working out. He didn't have a plan when it came to high school recruiting. He basically was like, hey, we're going to go to the portal every year, figure it out, and plug and play. And we might get a couple of guys here and there. We might develop them. But Jed's firmly been of the belief of, hey, I want Dylan Robinson. I want 3 receivers every year to come in and lay that foundation. I want a running back or 2 every year. Brian Bonner, Adam Muhammad, Jonah Coleman. So there's a hierarchy, and you go on down the positions, and that's exactly what you want. And the interesting thing about it is the reason why you give Jed Fish everything, because he knows how to build a quote unquote professional program. So you give Jed Fish 2 more years and he doesn't achieve that ceiling. The infrastructure is there for somebody else to capitalize on what Jed Fish couldn't. And so I think it's a worthwhile investment for the university, for fans, for everybody else to say, you know what, let's make this a destination. Because by the way, what did Ohio State teach you? What are the kind of getting into the third segment here? Showing up, traveling, investing, committing, being that resonates. And let me tell you, I knew this back when UW faced Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. They travel unlike any other. And the fact that UW has such a wide-ranging fan base in terms of where they are, alums, where the alums are located, there's no reason UW can't be in that same echelon.
No, I absolutely agree. That was one thing I remember just from sitting in the stands at that game in the Rose Bowl a bunch of years ago. This program travels really, really well no matter where they are. One more thing before I move on here. And I know this is something that, you and I as big-time Pac-12 guys, the conference realignment and all that is RIP. Conference realignment and all that, it is really hard, and it does suck. And there are a lot of things, that are lost in the tradition of college football. But you and I on the show have always called it an adapt or die sort of movement. And this is one of the things that moving to the Big Ten shows you, because when you are in the Pac-12, you are a big fish in a smaller pond. It was Oregon, and it was USC. Those are the biggest programs on a year in, year out basis. And Utah obviously has their own thing. And they're a really solid program. I honestly think they're Big Ten caliber, but this is what it looks like to compete with the best and be at the highest echelon of college football, to compete with Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State every single year. That's what it looks like. And that's what you need to invest in. And Jed Fish understands that. He does. And that's something that I've been really impressed with him and his entire coaching staff since they got here. And I'm excited to see how that's going to play out. And Lars, one person who I'm also really excited to see how his career continues is Alex McLaughlin. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at Quo. One of the tools that helps make a huge difference for business owners is Quo, formerly OpenPhone. It's the same great business phone system you've heard me talk about before, just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed call is money left on the table. When every customer conversation counts, you need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or computer. So no more carrying 2 phones or relying on a landline. Whether you're a solo operator or juggling everything or part of a larger team, Quo makes it easy to stay responsive and professional. See why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly OpenPhone. Get started for free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. That's QUO.com/lockedoncollege. And if you've got existing numbers with another service, Quo will port them over at no extra charge. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. We've also got a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, and even followed the live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats just like me, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Lars, I'm ashamed of myself. I have to start this there. There's no other way to start. Alex McLaughlin was tremendous in this game against Ohio State. Leads all tacklers with 13, 10 of them solo. If you go back to our preseason bold predictions, I think one of us might have said he was going to lead the team in tackles. I don't know. Somebody might have said that. But this is something where we've started to see him get a lot more I don't want to say respect, but just a lot more notoriety. Shout out to the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, which is a tremendous show over on Pro Football Focus by Trevor Sikkema and Connor Rogers, who gave him a big time shout out as a riser in draft stock after the Washington State game, where obviously he was tremendous with a couple of picks, including the pick 6 in that contest. But this is somebody who This is exactly the role that he was built for. Now that he is up over 200 pounds, I know I say that a lot, but it is really, really important and can withstand the physicality of college football. Having him down in the box with the range and the football IQ that he is someone who is always around the football and has consistently found a way to make plays. And as the season goes on, there are certainly some people who are going to look at this and say, why is a safety your leading tackler? That shows problems here and there. And sure, but this is the way the defense is designed. It's designed for someone to come down, for a safety specifically, to come down into the box and basically line up as an inside linebacker and clean plays up. And that's exactly what he did in yesterday's game, because 10 of the tackles were solos. And it's just exciting to see where you go back and you watch the film and he's reading some of these plays so well. And after 2 years at the FCS level, like, it's so clear that he's developed just such tremendous instincts and just is always in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, he has to have one of, let's say, the top 3 football IQs on the team. Fair to say, maybe top 5 at least. We should do that segment sometime.
That'd be fun.
But no, for that exact reason. And I remember watching that final drive that Ohio State had as they were going towards the UW end zone. Alex was fired up. Alex was one of the guys where he was not happy about how that game ended. And I think that's why it shows, where he's so passionate. He's so invested. He studies the game more than anybody else. I think you can really see that shine through. Right? I know everybody wants to tell, hey, I watch film, I do this and that. Alex shows it, literally shows it. Like the definition of it, when you're in the right place at the right time that often and you make sound tackles and your PFF tackle grade is in the 80+ range, 85+ range consistently, that's not just by coincidence. And I think pairing him with Taylor Mays probably is the best thing he could have ever done for his career. I think that's something. I know they have John Richardson, Ryan Walters being the DC and secondary coach, previous stops. I think that relationship also doesn't get enough light, because the way that Taylor Mays played, you can start to see a little bit of that Alex McLaughlin, even though Alex is a little bit, not slimmer, shall we say, because Taylor Mays was built like a fullback. But, Alex is
still is, man.
It's hilarious. But Alex is starting to play a little bit like him while still keeping that, I don't want to say Budda Baker-esque range and athleticism, but he's got some of that Taylor Rapp, Budda Baker. You can just run down the names of Husky safeties that he reminds you of, and it's kind of a conglomeration of all of them.
No, absolutely. And that's such an important part of this is he certainly is continuing a long line of success at the position at Washington, which is really, really fun. But I want to go back to something that we talked about on the postgame show as well. Sorry to switch gears here like this. I just know there are a couple other things that we wanted to make sure we talked about. And I want to talk one more time about the importance of Jacob Manu, because you could just tell that, like, I think Budda Alukta, Exree Alexander, and Devin Bryant all bring their own just strengths to this roster, I want to say. But I look at what Jacob Manu brought and the downhill physicality that he brings in the run game. Exree Alexander too, but I think Manu just having more experience at the power forward level after, spending 3 years at Arizona and being a starter there practically the entire time. It's emphasized a little bit more, because Exree was critical, especially on that 4th down stop early in the ball game. He's even just less than a year removed from the torn ACL. It was so clear what kind of just veteran leadership and physicality he brings to the middle of the defense. And yes, against Ohio State, it's going to get lost a little bit in how everything else played out. And one thing that I think is, when we were talking about the defensive line earlier and the lack of pressure and the lack of different things like that, Washington only had 1 TFL in this game. When you look down the line, that's something that I think adding Jacob Manu back to this rotation as a starter, just kind of throwing him out there and saying, all right, we're still going to keep you on a snap count, but having him and Exree Alexander out there, I feel like Jacob Manu is going to pop here really, really soon, assuming the plan is to just, throw him out there every week and burn the red shirt at this point in time, especially following the Budda injury. He is someone who I think if Washington can get back on track and survive some of these injuries, get Rahshawn Clark back, get Tacario Davis back, whoever else might be able to return from their various injuries, he is someone who's going to be a crucial player when we look back at the end of the year.
For the same reason that next weekend, like we talked about, going to Maryland, those are the types of games that you need that veteran presence, especially on defense, where Tacario probably going to play again at this point. Now, who knows it? He should play. Most of the guys coming back, near coming back, should be going against Maryland. But even if they don't, that's why if you have Jacob back for that game, he gives you a calming presence. And then you have Alex McLaughlin, like we talked about, behind him. And then if you can get Javon Parker back in front of them, that's another body that you can just add to the mix. And I think the more you start to stack veteran bodies, you're looking at this and saying, I think they had 4 first-time starters yesterday against on Saturday against Ohio State with Dylan, and I think there was a couple others in there. Hayden Moore theoretically somehow played in that game as well. And you look at it and think, okay, you have good bodies, but certain guys should play a certain role. Like Devin Bryant's a really, really good player in his role. Do you want him leading the team in snaps at linebacker at the end of the season, or would you prefer Jacob Manu in that position for this year? And then maybe Devin next year is the guy, you want to play next year's Adrius, or you figure that out down the road. I'm leaning towards Jacob for the exact same reason you mentioned, where it's that veteran presence that you can't coach, you can't teach, you can't say, hey, we need you to be a veteran, we need you to take the leadership role. You either got it or you don't, and Jacob Manu has it. And again, a little bit of Ben Burke-Herbin in him as well, just that little feistiness, undersized linebacker that happens to have range and sound instincts. And I think that's really kind of the hallmark of what Jed looks for in his players. You know the game, you know where to be, you show up and you play.
No, absolutely. I really like where you're going with that. There's one other thing that I wanted to make sure we discussed, and it was just the performance of Demond Williams. And this is something I was having a conversation with our good buddy from Huskies Wire in front of the program, Alex Katzen, about after the game yesterday. When you look back at Demond's day, 18-22 for 170-something yards, 82% completion percentage, the way Jed talked about him after the game was, and this is something that Alex pointed out to me, it was not entirely positive. And I think for the first time in his career where it's, Demond still needs to, learn how to do this, learn how to do that, which is fine. And I think that was one of the reasons that, that this is just a good learning experience for this team. And you can take away just as many positives as you can negatives, because there's still play calling things that need to be worked out. That if you're showing these same things in, a week or two down the road, like there are going to be bigger questions, because you can look at Ohio State and say, yeah, they took this away, they took that away. And maybe Rutgers or Maryland might not be able to do that in the same light. But I look at what Demond did, and there were just so many little things, like anticipation wise. I look at where he had Decker to Graf over the middle for a first down, 10 to 12 yards. I really hope we get a chance to maybe ask him a little bit more about it. But it's something where, as he continues to learn and as he continues to just grow and expand his game, that's one thing that I think you certainly need to point out about Demond in a positive sense, is week in and week out, you see improvements in one area or another, which is very, very important. And one thing that you and I have talked about since he arrived on campus as a true freshman, it's every single day at practice and every single week in games, whether he was still backing up Will Rogers or became the starter, you saw him improve in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's something that, as he continues to learn, having the test of the Ohio State defense can certainly be viewed as a very good thing for him moving forward, because if we see him start to anticipate throws over the middle of the field a little bit more and a little bit faster, all of a sudden this, your question that you opened the show with about a number 2 receiver, maybe we're not having that conversation as much anymore, because all of a sudden it's, oh, hey, look at that. Omari Evans was lined up in the slot and took like a couple of seam routes up the middle of the field for 15, 20, 25 yards respectively. And all of a sudden he's got, 3 catches for 65 yards, whatever it is. Like, these are all things that I think are really important to note. And as Demond continues to grow, we on this show have done have propped him up, rightfully so, because in the non-conference, there were not a lot of things to complain about. And in a game like this, where you're facing the number 1 defense in America, it's going to be a lot harder. And I think that I'm really excited to see what these lessons that Jed and Demond took away from this game are, and how they're going to translate next week against Maryland.
And the one thing we haven't seen from Demond, he hasn't regressed ever in back-to-back games. He might be stagnant. Never. He might have a 1% increase, but it's always been some level of upward trajectory. And again, looking at Maryland, they're 5.5-point favorites on FanDuel. Shout out FanDuel. You look, Washington is. And so you think, okay, Demond's getting the respect. And I put it out on Twitter. The Ohio State players showed respect to Demond Williams after the game. Like, they know how good he is. They just know the better supporting cast was on the Ohio State bench.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the season, so please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel through content every single day, so please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell, so never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please, if it's 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.